Luke never planned to buy anything that day. He had only stopped by the old trading post because his truck needed a few minutes to cool down after the long, dusty highway. The place had been there since before he was born. A wooden building with a faded sign and a creaking porch that always seemed one strong wind away from falling apart. But people passing through liked it because the owner, an elderly man named Carter, kept odd things, old tools, forgotten antiques, broken radios, and strange items no one could identify. Luke often stopped there for water or for small parts he needed for the ranch, but never for something unnecessary. That afternoon, however, as the sun hung low and hot above the empty road, Luke noticed something unusual. Outside the trading post, Carter had placed several wooden crates, each with a handwritten cardboard sign that read, $5 mystery box. The letters were crooked, and the cardboard was taped to the crates, as if placed there in a hurry. Some travelers laughed as they passed, shaking their heads and calling it junk. But Luke, instead of ignoring it, slowed his walk and stared. He did not know why the crates caught his attention. Maybe it was the way one particular box sat slightly apart from the others, tucked near a post, as if someone had placed it there with care. It was covered in dust, the wood darker from age, and a rough rope held it closed. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Something in him felt curious, something gentle and quiet, almost like a small voice telling him there was more inside than old waste. Carter came outside just then, wiping sweat from his forehead with a cloth. His gray mustache twitched when he saw Luke staring at the crate. "If you want one, $5, Carter said, almost laughing. "Probably nothing but trash in there, but you never know. Maybe you'll find something useful." Luke shrugged, knowing he didn't need more things in his life. Everything he owned had a purpose, and he didn't like unnecessary items. But today, something felt different. He crouched beside the old box, touched the rough wood, and felt a strange warmth, not heat from the sun, but something else. Something he couldn't explain. He didn't open it or even shake it. He just stood up and said, "All right. Why not? I'll take this one." Carter blinked, surprised. "That one? It's been in my attic for years. Could be empty for all I know." "It's fine," Luke replied. $5 isn't much." A pair of bikers filling their tanks nearby laughed loudly. "Man, really paying for a box of air?" one joked. Luke ignored them. He wasn't buying it for entertainment. Something had simply drawn him to it. He carried the crate to his truck, noticing it was heavier than expected. Not heavy like metal tools, but heavy like it contained soft weight, something that didn't shift. He placed it on the passenger seat and drove home, wondering the whole way why he had even bothered. By the time he reached his small ranch house, the sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky with warm orange light. His porch creaked when he stepped on it, the sound familiar and comforting. He set the crate down beside a rocking chair and sat for a moment, letting the cool breeze brush over him. The box sat there silently, almost as if waiting. Luke did not open it right away. He told himself he was tired, that he'd look inside later, but in truth he felt nervous without understanding why. He had bought boxes of tools before, old equipment, even random junk that he later used for spare parts. But this one felt different. It felt personal. As the sun lowered, curiosity became stronger. Finally, he crouched beside the crate and began untying the old rope. It felt stiff, brittle, as if it might break if pulled too hard. The lid lifted with a soft creak, the smell of aged wood rising from inside. Luke leaned closer, expecting old blankets or broken items. The first thing he saw, actually, was a blanket woven, old, with traditional patterns that looked handmade. Beneath it lay a few feathers, a small leather pouch tied with thin cord, and what looked like a folded piece of fabric. Luke sighed softly. It looked like things someone had collected long ago. Maybe personal items someone forgot. He reached in to move the blanket aside, and that was when he felt it. Warmth. Not the warmth of the sun-warmed wood. Warmth like skin. He froze. His breath caught. And for a moment he didn't move at all. Something inside him whispered that this wasn't right. Slowly, heart beating harder now, he lifted more of the cloth. There, curled deep inside the crate, barely visible in the fading light, was a person. A young woman. She was small, weak-looking. Her breathing so shallow he could hardly see her chest move. Her hair was long and dark, tangled from dust and dryness. Her clothes looked worn, as if she had been traveling or living outdoors. Her face was pale, her lips dry, her eyes closed tightly as if she had been unconscious for a long time. Luke felt his whole body go cold. He whispered to himself, "Oh no, oh no." For several seconds, he could not move. His mind raced. Why was she in a box? How long had she been there? Who put her there? Was she hurt? Was she even alive? He quickly reached forward, 2 fingers searching for a pulse along her wrist. It was faint, so faint he nearly missed it, but it was there. Relief rushed through him, but it was mixed with fear and confusion. Carefully, he slid his arms beneath her, lifting her from the crate. She was light, much lighter than she should have been. He could feel the tremble of her weak breathing as he held her. She didn't open her eyes, didn't make a sound, didn't even move. Inside his house, he placed her on the couch, his hands shaking now. He fetched water, a soft cloth, and a blanket, trying to work quickly without overwhelming her fragile body. As he wiped the dust from her forehead, he noticed details he hadn't seen outside traditional jewelry, a necklace made of beads and small carved pieces, and patterns on her clothing that told him she was Apache. Luke swallowed hard. This was not something simple. This was someone's daughter. Someone's family member. Someone whose life had taken a wrong turn. He set the cloth aside and knelt beside the couch, watching her breathing. His mind raced with questions. Should he call someone? Should he wait for her to wake? Would calling the wrong people put her in danger? What if she trusted no one? What if the situation was more complicated than it looked? He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing: he was not going to leave her like this. Hours passed as Luke stayed beside her, adjusting the cloth, keeping her warm, checking her breathing. Night deepened around the ranch, and the sound of distant insects filled the quiet rooms. Luke fought sleep, staying alert in case she woke or needed help. Then, near midnight, she moved. Her fingers twitched, her chest rose a little deeper, and slowly, very slowly, her eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, filled with fear and confusion. She looked around wildly, her breaths coming in weak gasps. Luke quickly spoke in a calm, gentle voice. "You're safe. You're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you. You're in my home. You're all right." Her gaze struggled to find him, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. But only the faintest whisper came out, barely audible in the quiet room. Luke leaned closer so he could hear. What she whispered changed everything. Luke leaned in quietly until he could hear the faint sound of her voice. Her lips barely moved, but her whisper was clear enough for him to understand one simple word: "Thank you." It was so soft that it sounded like a breath carried on the air, but it was filled with emotion. Luke felt something shift inside him. Even though she was weak and confused, the first thing she offered was gratitude. That alone told him something important about her character. He gently encouraged her. "You're all right. You're safe here." His voice stayed soft, because he sensed that anything louder might frighten her. Her eyes blinked slowly, as if they were adjusting to the light or trying to understand where she was. She looked around the room, breathing unsteadily, lifting her head only an inch before falling back against the pillow. Luke quickly supported her, helping her rest the right way. She opened her mouth again, but her voice trembled too much for her to speak clearly. He offered her a small cup of water and slowly lifted it to her lips. She drank only a tiny sip, but it was enough to help her regain a bit of strength. Her hands were cold, so he placed a warm blanket over her, adjusting it gently so she wouldn't feel trapped. After a few minutes, she whispered again. This time she asked where she was. Luke told her softly, "You're at my ranch. You were inside a crate. I found you and brought you in." She frowned in confusion, then closed her eyes tightly. as if trying to remember something. Her breathing grew quicker for a moment, like a small wave of panic, and Luke quickly reassured her again. "It's okay. No one is going to hurt you here." Those words seemed to calm her. She opened her eyes and looked at him more clearly now. She studied his face as if searching for some sign of danger or dishonesty. But Luke's expression stayed steady, calm, and sincere. She appeared to relax a little, though her body was still exhausted. Luke asked carefully, "Do you remember your name?" For a few seconds, she seemed unsure. Then she whispered, "Nayeli." Luke nodded gently. "That's a beautiful name." She tried to sit up again, and Luke helped her slowly rise enough to lean against two pillows. Her legs trembled under the blanket even though she wasn't standing. It was clear she hadn't eaten or drunk anything proper in a long while. Luke didn't push her with questions. He simply stayed nearby, ready to help if she needed anything. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of an old wooden clock on the wall. The slow rhythm seemed to help Nayeli find her breath again. After a moment, she looked around the room again at the old photographs on the shelf, at the oil lamp on the table, and at the window where moonlight was shining faintly. Everything was unfamiliar to her, yet somehow calm. Luke stepped into the kitchen and came back with a small bowl of warm broth. "Try to drink a little," he said gently. "Just a few sips." Nayeli took some with shaky hands, and Luke steadied the bowl so she wouldn't spill it. She drank slowly, each sip giving her a little more life in her eyes. When she finished half the bowl, she set it down in her lap and stared at the blanket as if remembering something painful. After a quiet pause, she whispered, Did anyone come?" Luke shook his head. "No. Nobody followed the crate. Nobody searched for it. I brought it home myself." Her shoulders dropped, part relief and part fear. Luke could tell she wasn't just running from danger, she was hiding from something she didn't know how to face. "Do you remember how you ended up in there?" Luke asked softly, not wanting to push but hoping she might remember something important. She closed her eyes and tried to speak, but the effort made her chest rise and fall unevenly. She took a deep, shaky breath and whispered, I was walking. Then, men. They came. I tried to get away. I fell. I don't remember after that. Everything went dark." She gripped the blanket tightly, her hands trembling. Luke felt a protective worry rise in him, but he didn't show any anger or fear in his expression. He wanted her to feel secure, not more frightened. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to remember everything right now. You just need to rest." She nodded faintly, grateful for his patience. Luke noticed how her eyes kept drifting toward the door, almost expecting someone to burst in at any moment. The fear in her eyes wasn't ordinary fear, it was deep, something that had been growing for days, maybe longer. Luke gently placed the bowl on the table and sat on the rocking chair nearby so she could see him without feeling crowded. He didn't want her to feel alone, but he also didn't want to overwhelm her. She watched him for several minutes, her eyes slowly becoming less panicked. Finally, she whispered something that made him sit up straighter. Don't let them find me." Her voice didn't carry anger. It carried fear. Real fear. Luke didn't know who they were, but he knew instantly that whoever they were, she didn't want to go back near them. He leaned forward, keeping his voice steady and soft. "No one is going to come here," he said. "I live far from the road. Most people don't even know about my place unless I invite them. You're safe." She swallowed slowly, her breathing calming a little. She looked around again, studying the walls and the furniture, as if reassuring herself that the space really was peaceful. The ranch house was old but warm. The wooden floor, soft lamplight, and gentle creaks from the porch all made it feel like a safe place to recover. Luke stayed awake for hours, watching over her while she rested. Sometimes, she opened her eyes for a moment, just to check he was still there. When she saw he hadn't left, she relaxed again. Her trust was fragile, like a thin thread holding her together. Luke knew he had to protect that trust. Outside, the wind carried the soft sound of trees rustling. Inside, the house felt almost like a shelter built exactly for the moment Nayeli needed it most. Luke didn't know her story, but he could see enough from her eyes to understand she had gone through days of fear and uncertainty. When the night was nearly over, she whispered again, this time with more clarity. Why? Why did you help me? Ah. Luke didn't hesitate. Because you needed help, and because no one should be left alone in a box. You deserve better than that. Her eyes softened, and for the first time since waking, her expression showed something other than fear. She looked touched, emotional, in a quiet, fragile way. She didn't respond with words, but her silence carried gratitude deeper than anything she could say aloud. Luke adjusted her blanket again, making sure she was warm and comfortable. She drifted into deeper sleep this time, her breath steady and calm. Luke stayed near, ready for anything she might need. As the first light of morning touched the horizon, Luke understood something clearly. This wasn't just a random mystery box he had bought. This was someone's life placed in front of him, someone who had endured something frightening and needed safety more than anything. And now, she trusted him with that safety. He looked at her sleeping peacefully and made a quiet promise to himself. He would not let anything or anyone harm her again. When morning sunlight touched the windows, Luke quietly stepped into the living room to check on Nayeli. She was still asleep, curled slightly on her side, breathing softly. Her face had more color than the night before, and her hands were no longer trembling. Luke felt relieved. He placed a cup of warm water on the small table next to the couch so she would see it when she woke. He didn't want to startle her, so he remained a few steps away, letting the quiet of the early morning fill the house. After a little while, she stirred. Her hand moved first, brushing against the blanket. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the morning light. She looked unsure of where she was for a moment until her eyes found Luke standing nearby. Her breath eased when she recognized him. She didn't smile, but her expression softened, showing a tiny bit of trust forming between them. Luke stepped forward gently. Good morning. How are you feeling? Her voice was weak, but clearer than last night. Better, she whispered. He offered her the cup of warm water, helping her lift it with steady hands. She drank slowly, her eyes closing as the warmth soothed her dry throat. When she finished, she handed the cup back and leaned against the pillows again. She was still tired, but her breathing was calmer, and she didn't look as scared as before. Luke didn't want to rush her, so he waited quietly until she spoke again. After a moment, she looked at the blanket she was holding in her lap and whispered her name again, almost like she was reminding herself. Nayeli. I remember, Luke said softly. It's a beautiful name. She gave a very small nod, almost shy, as if she wasn't used to hearing kindness about something as simple as her name. He sat on the rocking chair nearby so she could see him without feeling crowded. Nayeli stared at her hands for a long time, as if gathering courage. She lifted her eyes slowly and whispered, Where did you find me? Exactly, Luke explained calmly. In an old crate outside the trading post near the highway. I bought it without knowing you were inside. When I opened it at home, I found you. She listened carefully, her face showing a mixture of confusion and sadness. She swallowed hard, trying to process his words. In a crate, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. She wasn't asking for confirmation. She was repeating it as if trying to piece together her missing memories. He leaned forward slightly, making sure his tone was gentle. Do you remember anything else from before you were found? Nayeli closed her eyes for a moment. Luke waited patiently. When she opened them, he saw fear. Not the sharp panic from before, but a deeper, quieter kind that came from remembering something she wished she could forget. I remember walking, she whispered. I was alone. I was trying to get home. Then, I remember voices behind me. I tried to walk faster. Then, after that, everything is dark. I don't remember anything else. Luke nodded slowly. He didn't want to press her for more details. Her memories were unclear, and she seemed afraid of the small pieces she did remember. Instead of questioning further, he asked softly, Do you feel safe here? She looked at him directly for the first time since waking. Her eyes were dark and tired. But they held something else now, hope. She nodded. A small motion but filled with meaning. Yes, she whispered. I feel safe here. Luke felt something warm settle inside him. He wanted her to know she wasn't alone anymore. He stood and went to the kitchen, preparing a light breakfast, some soft bread, warm broth, and a bit of fruit. When he returned, Nayeli watched him with careful eyes, as if she still couldn't believe someone was being kind to her. Luke placed the plate gently on her lap. She ate slowly, her hands still weak but steadier now. After eating, she looked around the room again, studying the furniture, the pictures, the walls. Her gaze stopped at the window, where sunlight shone through the glass. She stared for a long time, almost as if the morning light felt foreign to her after the darkness of the crate. Luke followed her gaze. It's a clear day, he said quietly. If you want, I can help you sit outside for some fresh air later. Nayeli hesitated, then nodded slowly. She wasn't ready for the world outside the house yet, but she seemed to understand that sunlight could help her feel alive again. Before standing, she suddenly whispered, "Don't let them find me." Luke's heart tightened. The fear in her voice was soft but deep. He sat down again, leaning closer. "No one knows you're here," he said calmly. "And I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." She stared at him, searching for any sign he was lying. She found none. Something inside her relaxed. Her shoulders lowered slightly, and she exhaled a breath she had been holding since she woke. Later, Luke helped her sit up and placed a shawl over her shoulders. He opened the door slowly, letting the gentle morning breeze enter the room. The air smelled of pine trees and fresh grass. Nayeli stepped outside carefully, leaning on Luke's arm for support. Her legs were weak, but she could stand for a moment. Together they walked onto the porch where the wooden railing felt smooth under her hands. She looked out at the open land fields stretching in every direction, quiet and peaceful. Nothing around them hinted at danger. No loud cars, no strangers, no fast-moving shadows. Just stillness. For the first time since waking, Nayeli breathed deeply without trembling. Luke watched the way her eyes softened as she looked at the world beyond the porch. She seemed to let the sunlight touch her face, like someone remembering the warmth they once knew. But then, without warning, she grabbed the railing tightly, her body tensed. Her eyes darted toward the distant road, the small line of highway barely visible from the ranch. Luke immediately stepped beside her. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. She shook her head, trying to calm herself. I thought I saw someone." Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I'm still scared." Luke didn't dismiss her fear. He never once said she was imagining things or overreacting. Instead, he nodded. "It's all right. You've been through something difficult. Your mind is still recovering. You're safe here. I promise." Nayeli breathed slowly until her heartbeat steadied. Luke guided her back inside, letting her rest again on the couch. She curled beneath the blanket, holding it close like a shield of comfort. After a long, quiet moment, Nayeli whispered something unexpected. "Why are you helping me?" Luke didn't need to think about the answer. "Because you needed help. Because leaving you alone would have been wrong. Anyone with a heart would do the same." She watched him with wide, searching eyes, as if trying to understand why someone would show kindness without expecting anything in return. Her voice dropped to a soft whisper. "Not everyone helps, even when they should." Her words sank deep into Luke's thoughts. He could see she wasn't only speaking about the crate. She spoke from a lifetime of moments where help had not come, where people had walked past her pain. Luke knelt beside her so she didn't feel alone. "Well, you're not alone now." She stared at him for a moment long enough for something inside her to finally loosen. A small tear formed at the corner of her eye. She brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. But Luke pretended not to notice so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. He stayed close as she slowly drifted into another gentle sleep, feeling safer than before. Luke knew she still had fears, still had questions, still had memories she hadn't shared yet. But trust was building between them, slowly but surely. And he felt something else too, something calm and steady. A sense that he had been placed in that moment for a reason. That buying that $5 box wasn't an accident at all. The whisper she had spoken last night echoed in his mind again. Thank you. He didn't know her full story yet. But he knew one thing, with complete certainty. He would stand by her until she could stand on her own again. Morning sunlight slowly filled Luke's ranch house, warming the wooden floors and touching the walls with a soft glow. The peaceful light made the place feel even quieter than usual. Luke stepped into the living room and found Nayeli awake, sitting upright with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was staring at the window, her expression thoughtful, almost distant. She noticed him enter and lowered her eyes shyly, as if embarrassed to be seen so early. Luke smiled gently. You slept longer today? That's good. She nodded slowly. I still feel weak, but better than yesterday. That's all you need right now, he said kindly. Slow steps. He walked to the kitchen, preparing warm tea with honey. When he returned, he handed her the cup carefully so she could hold it without spilling. She blew on it softly and tasted a small sip. The warmth seemed to help her relax. Her shoulders lowered slightly, and she leaned back against the pillow with a quiet sigh. Luke sat in the chair nearby, waiting for her to speak. He didn't want to push her into sharing more than she felt ready to. But after a few minutes, she lifted her eyes and whispered something he had been waiting for. I remember a little more. Luke listened closely, but kept his expression gentle, not urgent. He didn't want her to feel pressured. Nayeli looked down at her hands. Her voice trembled lightly. I was walking near old roads. I was trying to reach my aunt's place. She lives far from towns. I didn't know the roads well. She paused, breathing slowly. Then I saw a group of men. Luke didn't interrupt. He nodded softly to show she wasn't alone. They asked me questions, she continued. I didn't understand why. I was just passing by. I tried to avoid them. They said they knew a shortcut. But something didn't feel right. I kept walking. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. She swallowed hard. I remember someone grabbing my arm. Then something hit the ground near me. Then everything went dark. She looked confused, as if the memory itself didn't make sense. When I woke up next, it was all dark and tight. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe well. I didn't know where I was. Luke felt a quiet sorrow inside him, but he kept his face calm and steady. You're not there anymore, he said softly. You're safe here. Nayeli nodded weakly. I know. But the feeling. She placed a hand on her chest. It comes back sometimes. He understood in a way words didn't need to express. Luke stood and opened the windows, letting fresh air fill the room. The smell of pine trees drifted inside, calming the atmosphere. Nayeli watched the gentle movement of the curtains, and her breathing eased. Would you like to sit outside again? Luke asked gently. Just for a few minutes. She hesitated, then nodded. Luke helped her to her feet. Her legs were still unsteady, but stronger than yesterday. He wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and guided her to the porch. She leaned on him lightly, trusting his support. When they stepped outside, a soft breeze brushed against them. Birds were singing from the trees. The morning sun warmed the porch steps, and the fields stretched out peacefully around them. Nothing about the scene looked dangerous. Nayeli took a slow breath and closed her eyes for a moment. It's quiet here, she whispered. Very quiet. That's why I like this place, Luke replied. No noise. No crowds. Just space. She looked at the horizon thoughtfully. It doesn't look like anyone can find me here. They won't, Luke assured her. This land is private. Only a few neighbors live miles away, and they keep to themselves. She seemed relieved, but the old fear still lingered behind her eyes. Luke could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned the distant road even when she didn't notice she was doing it. To help distract her, Luke pointed toward a small patch of wildflowers growing near the fence. They bloom early every year, he said softly. They come back even after winter. Tough little things. Nayeli followed his gaze. Her expression softened just a little. They're beautiful. Kind of like you, Luke said carefully and gently, without making her uncomfortable. He meant her strength, not her appearance. She lowered her eyes, touched by the kindness but not knowing how to respond. They sat on the porch for several minutes in peaceful silence. The quiet around them wasn't heavy. It was comforting, like the world was giving her space to breathe. After a while, Luke brought her back inside, where she could rest on the couch again. He made a simple breakfast: eggs, bread, and fruit, and let her eat slowly at her own pace. She finished most of it, which was a good sign. When she set the plate aside, she whispered, "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," Luke replied. "Taking care of someone in trouble shouldn't be rare." She looked at him with soft eyes, filled with something deeper than simple gratitude. It was trust growing slowly but steadily. Later that day, Luke decided something important. He didn't want to keep her situation hidden without giving her proper help, so he reached out to a local couple he trusted deeply, Daniel and Rosa, people known in the community for helping indigenous families and individuals in difficult situations. They arrived quietly, in an old pickup truck that didn't make much noise. When they walked inside the house, they approached Nayeli with slow, gentle steps, careful not to frighten her. Rosa spoke first with a warm smile. "Hello, dear. Luke told us you might need support." Nayeli sat up straighter, nervous but not panicked. She studied their faces carefully. Their expressions were kind, patient, and full of understanding. "We're here to help you in any way you're comfortable with," Rosa continued softly. "You don't have to share anything until you're ready." Nayeli looked at Luke. He nodded, encouraging her gently. She took a deep breath. "I don't remember everything," she whispered. "But I know I don't want to go back home alone. I'm scared someone will find me." Daniel nodded understandingly. "You don't have to go anywhere alone. We can help you contact your family in a safe way. We can also help you talk to people who can protect you, if you choose." Nayeli's eyes filled with quiet relief. She didn't cry, but her expression showed a weight lifting slowly from her heart. She whispered, "Thank you. All of you." Rosa held her hand gently. "You're brave, and you're not alone anymore." Luke stood nearby, not wanting to overwhelm her but staying close in case she needed reassurance. Seeing her gain allies made him feel a deep sense of peace. He had done the right thing by reaching out to help. After talking for a while, Rosa offered to take a message to Nayeli's aunt. They promised to make no calls that could reveal her location unless Nayeli agreed. She nodded gratefully, trusting them. When the couple left, the house grew quiet again, but in a different way. The silence wasn't heavy or fearful. It was calm. Nayeli looked at Luke and whispered, "I didn't think anyone would come for me. But now, it feels possible." Luke smiled softly. "You're going to be all right." She held the blanket closer and looked out the window again. This time, her eyes didn't show only fear. They showed hope, gentle and growing. Luke realized something then. The ranch house didn't feel like just his anymore. It felt like a safe place for someone who had needed shelter desperately. And her presence had changed the house in a quiet but meaningful way. Nayeli leaned back, took a slow breath, and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me. When you found me." Luke shook his head gently. "I never would have." In that moment, surrounded by sunlight, warm air, and the calm of the countryside, a fragile beginning of healing settled between them. She wasn't alone, she wasn't forgotten, and she wasn't trapped anymore. Days passed quietly on the ranch, each one bringing a little more strength back to Nayeli. At first, she could only walk across the room with help, but slowly, she began moving on her own. Luke always stayed close, not hovering or pressuring her, but being available whenever she needed support. As she grew stronger, the fear in her eyes lessened. Her shoulders stopped trembling each time she heard a sound outside. Her breaths became steady instead of shaky. Bit by bit, her spirit returned, like a small flame that had been nearly blown out but found air again. Every morning, she sat on the porch wrapped in a warm shawl Luke gave her. She liked watching the sunrise because it reminded her of new beginnings. She often held a cup of warm tea in her hands, letting the warmth settle into her fingers. Luke would sit a little distance away, sometimes fixing tools, sometimes checking his boots, sometimes simply sharing the quiet moment with her. They didn't always talk, but the silence was gentle and full of understanding. One morning, she looked at the open land and whispered, "I didn't think I would ever feel peace again." Her voice was soft, but the meaning behind it was deep. Luke glanced at her with a small smile. "You deserve peace," he said, "and you'll have more of it. This is just the beginning." She looked down shyly but didn't hide her face completely. For the first time since she arrived, she wasn't afraid to show emotion in front of him. Later that day, Daniel and Rosa returned with news. They stepped onto the porch with warm smiles, and Nayeli greeted them with a small nod. She no longer looked like someone who feared every stranger. Rosa sat beside her, taking her hand gently. "We spoke to your aunt," she said softly. "She's very worried about you. She thought you were lost and didn't know how to find you." Nayeli's eyes filled with quiet emotion. She breathed deeply before whispering, "She's safe? She's okay?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "She's safe. And she wants you to come home whenever you're ready. She's been asking about you every day." Nayeli closed her eyes for a moment, letting relief wash over her. It was the kind of relief that came from knowing someone still cared. Someone still waited. Someone still wanted her. Rosa continued, "We can take you to her. It will be safe. We'll go with you. And you won't be alone at any point." Nayeli looked at Luke as if asking what she should do. He didn't tell her what to choose. Instead, he said gently, "Whatever decision you make, I'll support it. You have people who care about you, and you have a home waiting." She nodded slowly. "I want to go to her," she whispered. Then she added, "But I want to say goodbye first." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had happened. Daniel and Rosa agreed to return in a few days, so she could regain more strength before traveling. When they left, Nayeli and Luke stayed on the porch, watching the dust settle on the quiet road. Nayeli held the shawl close and whispered, "I didn't want to disappear. I thought, maybe no one would find me." Luke looked at her with gentle eyes. "I'm glad I found you. Or maybe you found me." She smiled softly, her first real smile since waking on his couch. Over the next few days, she prepared herself mentally and physically for the journey ahead. She practiced walking more each day, circling the porch slowly. Luke stayed nearby, letting her set her own pace. Sometimes she paused to breathe, and he would simply stand with her until she was ready to move again. One afternoon, she asked him, "Can I see the box? The one you found me in?" Her voice was steady, not frightened. She wasn't trying to relive the pain. She was trying to gain control over it. Luke hesitated at first, but nodded. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," she whispered. He brought the crate out of the storage room. The moment she saw it, she froze. Her eyes lingered on the rough wood, the old rope, the scratches along the side. The air felt heavier for a moment. Luke waited silently, not pushing her to move closer. After several long seconds, Nayeli stepped forward. She placed her hand on the wood, touching it gently. Her fingers traced the edge of the lid. "This doesn't control me anymore," she whispered. "I'm not inside it now. I'm standing. I'm breathing." Luke felt something tighten in his chest, pride, sadness, and admiration all mixed together. Nayeli stepped back and nodded. "You can burn it or throw it away," she said softly. "It doesn't matter. It doesn't hold me anymore." Luke took the crate away, destroying it piece by piece until nothing remained. When he finished, she watched the empty space where it once stood, and her expression looked lighter, freer, almost brighter. That night, Nayeli sat on the porch with Luke again. The sky was full of stars, shining brightly over the quiet fields. She pulled the shawl around her and looked at him quietly for a long moment before speaking. When I woke up here, I wasn't sure if I was safe. I was scared of everything. But you were kind to me when you didn't have to be. Luke shook his head softly. Anyone should have helped you. But not everyone would, she said gently. That's why I'll never forget what you did. You gave me back my breath. You gave me back my voice. Luke didn't know how to respond at first. Her gratitude was deep and sincere. After a quiet pause, he said, I'm glad you're safe. That's all that matters. 2 days later, Daniel and Rosa returned to take Nayeli home. She wore clean clothes, her hair brushed neatly, her strength finally returning. When she stepped outside, her steps were steady, confident. She looked like someone who had stood in darkness and found light again. Before climbing into the truck, she turned to Luke. Her expression was filled with emotion, gratitude, peace, and warm affection. I want to give you something, she whispered. She reached into her small bag and pulled out a hand-carved wooden feather. It was beautifully made, shaped with delicate lines. She placed it in his hand with gentle care. This is for protection, she said. It's a symbol my family uses. I want you to have it. Luke held it carefully, feeling the smooth wood against his palm. Thank you, he said, touched. I'll keep it safe. Nayeli nodded, her eyes shining softly. You helped me stand again. You helped me find my way home. I'll always remember that. He stepped forward and opened the truck door for her. She climbed in carefully and looked at him one last time before Daniel started the engine. Goodbye, Luke, she whispered. Goodbye, Nayeli, he said gently. The truck drove away slowly, leaving a trail of dust behind it. Luke stood on the porch until the vehicle disappeared down the road. The ranch felt incredibly quiet. Almost too quiet. But peaceful too. Days later, Luke received a letter in the mail. He recognized the handwriting immediately, soft, curved, careful. It was from Nayeli. She wrote that she was safe, surrounded by her aunt and her people. She was healing well, gaining strength, and finding her smile again. She thanked him again for saving her, for believing her, for protecting her. She told him she kept him in her prayers and hoped life brought him the same peace he gave her. Luke folded the letter neatly and placed it inside a wooden drawer with the carved feather next to it. Every time he saw the feather, he remembered her quiet bravery, her trembling whispers, her first smile on the porch. $5 had changed everything. He thought he had bought a box of junk, but instead, he found a life that needed saving. And in saving her, he discovered a part of himself he didn't know he had.